Hi,
Hi, Shannon. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. Welcome to the Lift Oneself podcast, where we break mental health stigmas through conversations. I'm your host, Nat Nat, and we dive into topics about trauma and how it impacts the nervous system. Yet we don't just leave you there. We share insights and tools of self-care, meditation, and growth that help you be curious about your own biology. Your presence matters. Please like and subscribe to our podcast. Help our community grow. Let's get into this. Oh, and please remember to be kind to yourself. Welcome to the Lift Oneself podcast, Shannon. I am so thankful to have you here with me.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me.
Will you join me in a meditation so we can ground in our breath and drop into this moment?
Yeah, sounds good. Let's do it.
And for the listeners, a lot of you use the podcast for driving or you're doing some kind of activity with your visual. So I'm going to ask you not to close your eyes. I want you to be safe and others around you to be safe. Yet you can use the prompts to, guide yourself in whatever activity. If you do feel like it's getting too profound, just pause and, skip over to where we're having a conversation and come back to this meditation when you're able to be safe and really have a profound experience in this moment. So, Shannon, I'll ask you to get comfortable in your seat, and I'm going to ask you to gently close your eyes, and you're going to begin breathing in and out through your nose. And you're going to bring your awareness to watching your breath go in and out through your nose. You're not going to try and control your breath. You're just going to keep your focus on watching your breath go in and out. But you'll start to recognize a rhythm. There may be some sensations or feelings coming up in the body. Let them come up. You're safe to feel. You're safe to let go. Surrender the need to control. Release the need to resist and just be. Be with your breath. Drop into your body. Keep your awareness on your breath. Keep your awareness on your breath and drop deeper into your body. Now, Shannon, I'm going to ask you to create an intention in your mind of what you want to bring forth in this conversation for the listeners and for ourselves. And when you've created that intention, I'll ask you to release it in your mind, allowing it to drop down into your nervous system, down your throat, down your chest, filling your heart, your lungs, going down your abdomen, into your stomach, into your life force. Still staying with your breath, allowing that intention to surround your energetic field. Staying with your breath. Now, still staying with your breath at your own time and at your own pace. You're going to gently open your eyes while staying with your breath. How's your heart doing?
Good, good. Relaxed.
Can you let the listeners know who Shannon is?
Yeah, so my name is Shanenn Bryant, and I'm the host of a podcast called Top Self, where I focus on insecurity and jealousy in relationships. So I'm also a coach and super happy to be here. And thank you for giving a platform to hear about this.
And can you let the listeners know what the definition of insecurity is?
Thank you for bringing that up. We get envy and jealousy confused, or we use the term jealousy when we really mean envy. So I'd like to explain the difference between the two. When we talk about envy, that is really, if you think about maybe a coworker got the job promotion over you, or your neighbor's house, you feel like it's bigger or better. They drive a better car, maybe they make more money. Those types of things are envy, where you are wanting something that someone else has. Jealousy is more rooted in fear, and this is being worried that someone is going to take what you have. And in my case, and typically this is um, romantic partners. So that is jealousy, and it's healthy and normal. Most of us experience jealousy. It's when it becomes toxic and it's really guiding your life that then it becomes a problem, and we need to take a look at it.
And how do you guide people to take a look at that insecurity or acknowledge it?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is that acknowledgement that it is a you thing. A lot of times we want to blame our partners in the beginning. If you hadn't looked at that person, I wouldn't have gotten jealous. If you would give me more attention, I wouldn't feel insecure. So a lot of times we kind of want to project these things onto our partner and place the blame there. So it's really getting aware that most of the time with the people that I work with, when there's no evidence that anything is going on or that your partner's doing anything wrong, we know that that's a me problem. So first, it's just, okay, being really clear that this is something that we have to address, because when you're in that mode of looking through the jealous lens, you're going to think that you saw what you saw or that your partner did do those things. And sometimes, okay, let's say your partner did look at the other person, the other attractive person. That's okay. It because it's really meaning, what meaning are you putting on it about yourself? So that may happen that they do that. Sometimes they don't, and we just mistake it. Sometimes maybe that does happen, but why is that something that's guiding your life? And so we really start there, first of all.
And what got you into this kind of work?
So I think, like a lot of us, when you go through things yourself and you've spent many years trying to figure out, okay, how do I manage this? How do I get through this? What things make it better? That's really how I landed on it. So I grew up, my father was an alcoholic, so I grew up in a very violent and chaotic environment. So if somebody would have told me 8 years ago that I'd be helping other people overcome insecurity and jealousy, I would have said, no way. I thought that's just who I am. I'm always going to be this way. It's part of my makeup. It's in my DNA. This is me. And I also thought I was the only person who reacted in these ways, who had these insecurities or that had these insecure habits of being jealous in my relationships. And so I really thought I was the only one. Um, and I was talking to a women's ACA group, so adult children of alcoholics, and just speaking to that group, talking about what it was like to grow up with an alcoholic, and then kind of some of the behavior characteristics that and challenges that I had as an adult. And I started talking about jealousy and how, I stayed maybe in relationships too long because of my insecurity. And then I maybe sabotaged some relationships with some perfectly fine people because of my jealousy. And so after that, all at the end, all these hands went up, and these women were saying, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you just talked about that out loud. I can't believe you told your story. Thank you so much for doing that." I am that way too. I feel that way too. And so one of the hard things with jealousy is people don't want to talk about it. The people who suffer aren't talking about it. It's very complex, and it comes with a lot of shame and embarrassment. So they're not talking about it. And then there's not a lot of resources of people who are helping in this area because it is so complex. So that's really, when I heard that, I thought, okay, that's what I need to be talking about. And if I can help somebody else overcome this, or at least manage it a little bit better and quicker than I did, and it not go on for decades like it did for me, then that's what I want to do. So I started the podcast.
And do you still experience feeling insecure?
Sure. That still comes up from time to time. I actually have an episode 2 years ago. My husband and I were in Costa Rica, and I, recorded it right after we were on the beach. The situation was perfect for someone to get a tinge of that jealousy. And so I share that because it's normal that you're going to have it. It's just, how do I get it to the point where it's not running my life? Because for a lot of people, this is a daily thing. They're feeling anxious every single day. They're ruining their relationships. They start to get into habits that are that where they feel like, I can't focus at work. I don't feel present with my kids because I'm so focused on my partner and so worried about these things. And so that's when we have to really go, well, how can I manage this so that it's not running my life? So yeah, it still comes up.
Yeah, I think that's where people get the disillusion that once we do healing or we face something, it will be poof, gone, and you've arrived at a place that you know
Yeah.
it all, you get it all. And it's like, well, life is impermanent and life is about change. And things, just because you address a wound, it's like you said, you got to build the tools around it to be
Mhm.
able to navigate those waves and not just get drowned in the tsunami of it and it overtaking your behavior.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, and one of the good things is I was able to go back and go, oh, I can now look back and go, this is why this happened. I was already tired. We hadn't eaten. It had been a long day. I was already kind of going into it with a negative mindset. There were just certain things that are very identifiable that going back, which is what I recommend people do anyway, of going back, like, let's do some evaluation when we have those jealous meltdowns. So then it becomes, okay, how can I do this better next time? Or how can I manage it a little bit better next time?
Yeah. So how do you what is a process that you work your clients through, and
Mhm.
what does that look like for a listener that may be like, "Oh, this is me," and wanting to be
Sure.
curious about this?
Yeah, I think so. The first thing is really getting to that self-awareness part. We talked a little bit about getting the awareness of, okay, this is a me problem, but then what do I do? There's still some awareness that we need to come to. And so what I do is, it's sort of a three-prong um, process that we look at, and it's think, do, and say. So, what are the insecure things that I think on a daily basis? And this could really, going back to, you mentioned the sort of the core wounds that we may have. And so, what are the things that I'm saying to myself? In my case, um, my dad left when I was 12 after my parents got divorced. We didn't have a relationship until the last 3 years of his life, and I was in my 40s. So, I told a story to myself that, well, gosh, if my own dad doesn't love me, why would anyone else? I must not be worthy of love. So those are kind of some of the things that we have to dig in a little bit. Like, what are you thinking in your head that is on a kind of this constant play in your life? Then what are the things that I'm saying? So, what are the things that I'm saying to my partner? This is really shocking for some people because they kind of know that maybe they're making some jabs at their partner from time to time. But when we really get to, well, how often are you saying them and how many are you saying? So, my favorite one was, maybe my husband was trying to get me to remember something and say, don't you remember, that time that we went here? If I didn't remember right away, I may say something like, oh, that must have been your girlfriend. Oh, that must have been your girlfriend you did that with or that you told. And just that statement alone, not a big deal. But when it's being said to your partner over and over, along with some of the other accusations or maybe your line of questioning, then it really does become a problem and it starts to invade your relationship. And that certainly sending a message to your partner, hey, I don't trust you. So that's the say. And then the last one is the do. So, what are the things, the insecure habits and that insecure habit loop that I'm in? So, it could be checking their phone, their email, their text messages, social media accounts, looking them up on location. Are you giving them a line of questioning, not because you're interested in their day, but because you're trying to connect the dots or see if they're lying? So the do is really important. So I'm having them make a list of these things. And then for the do ones, this is really where then we start to go into the work. We want to find one that's probably the easiest one. If you had to give one up, let's start there. The easiest one for you to do. You can do all the other 27 things that you're doing. Let's start there and try to break that, start breaking that habit cycle. And a lot of times that's going to require like, well, what is that story that I'm telling myself? What am I making these things mean? But we start there.
Would you say a lot of your clientele are those that experience trauma in their childhood?
Yeah, I'm really finding that people fall into two buckets. So one is they had some type of dysfunction growing up. So maybe they had a parent who wasn't really parenting well. That's sort of one bucket, is having that dysfunction. The other one, though, can be, no, my childhood for the most part was fine, no big issues, but maybe they had a relationship with someone who cheated on them, or maybe they had a series of relationships where there was infidelity. And so anytime then we have those big wounds that happen, or this, pattern that we start to see, our brains are going to work just like they should and go, hey, I don't want that to happen again. So I'm going to do anything I can to keep you safe and protect you from that, whether it's healthy or not. And unfortunately, most often it's like the fastest, easiest way, which is typically unhealthy for us. So that's where we get into some of these insecure habits.
Yeah, and I understand that people use the brain as the one that's creating this, but really it's the nervous system and its defense mechanisms to protect the vulnerability and also protect you from pain. Yet a lot of people have so much aversion to pain that they don't
Mm.
even realize that they're creating these defense mechanisms that are causing even more harm for themselves, because there are some painful things that you do have to experience, yet not allowing yourself to feel these big emotions or profound insights about yourself is doing the damage.
Yeah. I mean, I say sit in the suck, sometimes we have to really go through it, and you have to, because what we want to do is go, ugh, I don't want to feel that. So what's the thing I can do to stop that feeling as fast as possible? And, so we have to just be able to recognize what that is and say, okay, this is jealousy coming up. This is how I'm feeling. And what is the story that I'm telling myself about this situation? Because a lot of times, too, we then, our initial thought of what the situation is, because that nervous system, right, is so ramped up, we go, oh, this must be true because I'm feeling this way. I'm feeling very strong about it. So this must be true. And so I encourage people, I call it the power of one, not the original power of one, but O-N-E, open to new. And then you fill in the E, explanation, evidence, examples. What else could this be?
Yeah. Susan David coined it very well, that emotions are data, not direction.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
It's like when your stomach growls, okay, that's telling you you're hungry, but we don't have to eat every time, we don't, that doesn't mean you have to eat just because your stomach growled. So yeah, it's similar. Yeah, to look at
yeah.
it that way.
And even the ghrelin, it might just be the digestive of acids and stuff like that. Or and it's again creating that body awareness and really understanding and coming out of the indoctrination that, like, we've been taught you have to eat at a specific time, you have to eat these kind of times, rather than really inquire, what does your biology need? Like, each
Yeah.
individual is unique, not just this set of, we all do it the same way, which we were
Hmm.
conditioned in the school system to do, where a lot of people disassociated from their body and what their needs were biological. So then I'm
Yeah.
sure it can be very confusing to come back into, oh, wait, my responsibility is within myself, and to do that
Mhm.
introspection of questioning and looking and feeling.
Yeah. And that, you just made me think of, I want to make it very clear that I think because jealousy brings so much shame, or it's tied to so much shame, here's the thing. If you've been cheated on before, or there's been several times where that's happened to you in your relationships, or you did have a parent that abandoned you, or you felt like they abandoned, like it, it's it makes sense that you would feel that way, right? That makes sense that you would feel that way. And I think people want to go, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me. There's something, I'm broken in some way. I'm not normal. And in fact, that is very normal response to those types of things, right?
Yeah. A lot of times we weren't validated with our authentic emotions. And so when people, especially with my clients, when they come about shame and guilt, and I'm like, okay, let's see what the underpinning is. We're going to go through this. We're not going to avoid it and tell it, oh, shame shouldn't be here and it's worthless and everything. It's an emotion that's trying to protect you. What is it protecting you from? And as you mentioned, there's a lot of times that we've been conditioned to be a habit of being in a certain mental state to protect
Yeah.
ourselves and be in a
Hmm.
low vibration, be pessimistic, be downing on ourselves, self-sabotage. And logically, yes, it doesn't make sense. Yet these are defense mechanisms of the intelligence. Well, you're telling me you can't experience the pain, so I'm going to try to help you be out of the pain, but really creating even more pain.
More
So
pain.
yeah, so it's like, do you want the dull ache of denial or do you want the sharp truth of pain? So when you go
Right.
into the truth, you just have a sharp pain, but there's not this ache that happens anymore because you see the truth. And then it's
Hmm.
like, okay, well, how do I show up for myself? Because I think a lot of times with insecurity too, you didn't have that validation of being able to make sense of what that experience was. So you created that narrative to protect yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't understand at 12 years old, when my dad chose alcohol over me, I didn't understand, oh, this is a disease and his father was this way and this is, I didn't know that. So, of course, yes, I'm trying to make sense of why my dad doesn't have contact with me. Oh, it must be something about me. It must mean I'm not worthy of his love. And then, of course, that develops into I'm going to operate from that story, and that's what I did. You mentioned kind of like this comfort zone that I did in these relationships. And even with my current relationship with my husband was probably the worst of, well, wait a second, like nothing's really wrong. This is going really well. I'm so used to chaos. And not on a conscious level, I wasn't thinking that, but I would do things to then stir up that chaos because even though I didn't like it, that's what was comfortable for me. That's what my body knew to live in that type of environment. And so I would stir it up to
And what
get it
that
back to comfort.
Yeah, and what that is also, if people want to understand the scientific aspect, it's addicted to adrenaline. When there's chaos, adrenaline gets dumped in. So when you're in arguments and contention, there's a physical feeling and there's adrenaline being dropped into your system because you feel like you're going to fight and have to defend. And
Yeah.
so that chaos, you're like, logically, why would I want to crave this when I'm in a really, and it's like, it's just your biology. So it's going to take some time to shift and pivot that in your system, but that's your work to do. And
Yeah.
that's your work to face that. And also give yourself space to allow the mistakes, allow the messiness. And I think that's what's important in relationships is that communication.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then they're figuring out other ways like, okay, well, how do I, are there other ways that I can communicate in this relationship or other ways where what is my like can I change that comfort zone of what it looks like, right? So that it's a healthier zone for me to be in versus this, oh, I just have to have this adrenaline all the time or this fight or flight, be in this fight or flight response all the time.
Yeah. I'm going to bring you into a reflective question.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you to take your awareness right now and to go back to your 18-year-old self. And
Mm-hmm.
you have 3 words to tell your 18-year-old self to carry you to the journey of right now. What would they be?
Oh, all the statements I keep coming up with have 4 words, not 3. Okay.
Fine.
Change the path.
Okay. Can you give some context to that?
Yeah. I because it's kind of what I wanted to say is like change the way you were raised in a sense of, because I feel like that's sort of what this work has led me to do of, okay, I don't have to, just because I told myself that story or that's something that I believed, it's not the truth for me now. And it wasn't the truth then. And being okay and forgiving myself that that's how I interpreted that. That's okay. It's okay that maybe I damaged relationships. I'm accepting, not okay, but I'm accepting that I maybe damaged relationships because of that. Again, because that's what I knew at the time. And knowing that you can make changes to that to have a different future. We don't have to stay in the way that we were raised. And so I don't have to continue to operate from that place. I can learn new ways to operate and learn new ways to manage through them.
Are you willing to share what your intention was at the beginning of the podcast?
Yeah. So my intention at the beginning was really just to touch someone who may have been experiencing this, who felt like, oh, I've never heard this before. I didn't maybe know that that's what I was doing. I knew that, I'm causing these things in my relationship, but I didn't really know that that's what it was. And to touch that person and just give them the information, whether it's just a seed right now of, hey, this might be something that I need to look into. Because in my intention, even with the podcast, is letting people know or getting to those people who are experiencing this, who are afraid to talk about it. Because even sometimes when they talk about it with a friend or a family member, especially when there's been no evidence that their partner's done anything, that's sort of what they hear back is, why are you worried about that? Like nothing's even happened. Why are you so worried about that? Which then makes them feel even worse about themselves and even more broken than they already do and different than they already are. And so just letting them know like it makes sense of why you would feel the way you do.
Yeah, once you start to understand more in emotional intelligence and you do your own work inside, it's, are you validating that person's experience? It may not make
Yeah.
sense to you, yet you want to help that person make sense for themselves of why are these sensations coming up? Yet most times people don't realize we project it because we don't want to feel the stuff within ourselves. To
Yeah.
hold space for emotions takes you being able to be okay with your own emotions. And especially
Mhm.
the big one is fear. And we're in a
Yeah.
society that doesn't want to acknowledge I'm feeling afraid. Like,
Yeah.
why should you be afraid for? Like, you're in a healthy relationship and you got it all. And it's like, well, there's always this threat of loss. Like,
Mhm.
no matter, even if you haven't experienced any significant big pain, the nervous system also understands that there's an impermanence and it's just has this worry of loss. So
Yeah.
there's
And sometimes
part of,
too, it shows up when that person is going, oh, maybe these stakes are a little bit higher, even. This is a person that I'm really interested in. This is a person I could really, you know, build a life with. So now the stakes are really high for this relationship.
yeah, it's revealing that vulnerability. And once people really understand there's pain in love,
Hmm.
because no matter
Yes.
what, there's going to be a loss.
Hmm.
Like a
Yeah.
parent having a child, it's a threat because your vulnerability that you're connected, attached to this human being, yet one of us are not going to make it to the end at the same
Hmm.
time, possibly, but most times it's not the same thing. So there's this underlying anxiety and fear that's always looking out for, when is this going to change? And
Yep.
that's where we have to just, when you validate and you acknowledge it, it doesn't keep growing. It's like, oh, okay, so you see me, everything's okay. It's like, yeah, it's okay. Yet in our society, we haven't allowed there to be enough of a space just to say, I'm feeling afraid.
Hmm. Yeah. And in those relationships, like you were saying, I think there's this false sense of security that we think, oh, once I find the person and we settle in, that they're never going to hurt me or upset me. And if they do, then that's a big problem. This is and so even not just we're both not going to make it to the end at the same time, but as humans, I mean, we do unintentionally hurt each other. We do unintentionally cause pain to the other person, and that can definitely happen. So there's this sort of false sense of security in that if we would just, as you say, like settle in and just know that that's going to be part of it. It doesn't make the person a bad person. It doesn't necessarily make the relationship bad. That is part of being in a relationship and accepting this is the vulnerability that I'm walking into.
Yeah, and what I think really needs to is communication. Most people don't know how to communicate in relationships because they don't know how to reveal their emotions. They don't know how to reveal the vulnerability of it. And that's work to start to reveal that and trust. And, I understand that people are like, oh, I need to trust you, where it's like, no, you need to trust yourself that you can go
Yes.
through the pain or whatever experiences and not separate from yourself.
Yes. You hit it. Thank you so much for bringing that up of trusting in yourself, because that is what we're trying to do is go, oh, I have to trust in my partner. And we don't know, even that trust of, well, we can't guarantee that the two of you are going to be together for the rest of your lives. You can't guarantee that the partner isn't going to step outside the relationship. There are no guarantees in that. So it's trusting in yourself. And if you've got that trust in yourself, then if those things are starting to show themselves, I get that question all the time. Well, like, oh, if I stop checking, how will I know? Like, how will I know if there's something going on? Well, you look at it sort of the opposite way too of, well, you can't prove fidelity. Because what you really want is happening, if you really are like, oh, I hope my partner is being 100% faithful to me and they're not doing anything like that behind my back. If that's actually happening, then you would look forever, because you're never going to see what you're never going to see that proof of something different because they are behaving in that way. So it becomes that just again, being, if I trust in myself to know, okay, if I do see signs of this, then I am, strong enough to ask questions. And I'm also strong enough to walk away if I do find out that that is something that's going on, if that's my choice to do so.
Yeah. Now, I know the listeners like, enough, Nat, can you let me know where I can find Shanenn Bryant? So can you let them know where they can find you, please?
Sure. Topself.com. That's the website. There are free resources on the website as well. They can connect with the podcast there, or they can follow me on Instagram at Top Self Coach.
And do you have anything that you want to leave the listeners?
I think just the message of, it's understandable, perhaps, why you would be feeling the way that you do. Doesn't mean that there aren't changes to be made, but it's not something to be ashamed of or embarrassed of. And if you can start talking about it, then you can start changing it.
Thank you so much for the alchemy that you have done in your life of taking the impurities and, not just only transforming the gold and keeping it for yourself, you're sharing it with others. So thank you for doing that work and shining a light for others to find the journey back home within themselves.
Well, thank you for having me.
Remember to be kind to yourself.
Hey, you made it all the way here. I appreciate you and your time. If you found value in this conversation, please share it out. If there was somebody that popped into your mind, take action and share it out with them. It possibly may not be them that will benefit. It's that they know somebody that will benefit from listening to this conversation. So please take action and share out the podcast. You can find us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok under Lift Oneself. And if you want to inquire about the work that I do and the services that I provide to people, come over on my website, come into a discovery call, liftoneself.com. Until next time, please remember to be kind and gentle with yourself. You matter.